Okay, so I want you to imagine something for a second. Just picture this. You're standing in the absolute dead center of a massive stadium.
Right in the middle of it.
It's pitch black, but you can feel the air. It's heavy, it's hot, humid. From the breath and the body heat of, I don't know, 80,000 other people.
You can almost taste it.
You really can. And the concrete floor under your feet, it's actually vibrating. It's this low, deep rumble that's shaking your entire ribcage. And then a sound starts. Synth melody, maybe a piano riff. And it's rising, it's getting faster and higher, and it starts looping on itself. And just when you think it can't build anymore, boom, the lights just cut through the dark. Lasers, strobes, pyrotechnics, confetti cannons blasting everywhere. And then the bass drops. And it hits you in the chest like a physical.
It's not just sound, it's a feeling, physical force.
It really is. The crowd just roars. This one unified sound that drowns out everything else. And for just a single moment, every single person in that stadium is perfectly synchronized. It's pure chemical grade euphoria. It's neon. It's loud. It is the absolute peak of the party.
It's almost like a religious experience for a secular world. That moment for so many people is the peak of modern connection. It's the definition of release.
Exactly. And standing right in the middle of that storm on this raised podium, usually surrounded by giant LED screens, there's a silhouette. It's just one guy with his right hand in the air, and he's controlling the heartbeat of 80,000 people.
And in the early 2010s, that was Tim Bergling.
Known to the entire planet as Avicii. He was the golden boy. He was the guy who literally forced pop radio to play dance music. He was the superstar living the exact dream that every kid with a laptop wanted.
But that image, that silhouette, the hand in the air, the smile, the confetti raining down, that was the product, that was the brand, that was Avicii.
And that's really why we're here today.
Yeah.
We aren't just here to, list his greatest hits. We've got a massive stack of sources in front of us. Biographies, documentaries, police reports, and a ton of interviews of the people who are closest.
A really deep well of information.
And our mission really is to look past the laser. Because if you strip away all the sold-out shows and the private jets, the reality behind that silhouette it was heartbreakingly different.
There's a quote from one of our primary sources that it really anchors this whole deep dive. It says, behind the stadium anthem, he was just a young man trying desperately to find peace in a lifestyle that kept suffocating.
Suffocate? That's such a visceral word, right? Especially for someone who spent his life in these huge open-air festivals, presumably having the time of his life.
It's the core paradox of his whole...
It is. So this isn't just a biography of a DJ. We're going to look at the mechanics of modern fame, the industrial complex of electronic dance music, or EDM in America, and the tragic cost of the machine that builds up our idol. We're going to trace the entire arc.
From the very beginning.
From a shy bedroom gamer in Stockholm to the world's first true superstar DJ, and then finally to the collapse that ultimately led to his death.
And I think we really need to frame this correctly right from the jump. This is a case study on personality type. I mean, this is what happens when you take a deeply sensitive, anxious introvert, someone who recharges in silence, and you force them into the role of the ultimate extrovert.
Night after night after night.
For years on end, it's a recipe for a breakdown.
So let's get into it. Let's unpack this. We have to rewind way, way back. Before the private jets, before the name Avicii even existed, there was just Tim, born in 1989 in Stockholm, Sweden.
And on paper, it was a very standard, even comfortable upbringing. His father, Claes Bergling, he worked in business. His mother, Anki Liden, is actually a very famous actress in Sweden.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Emma's how?
She starred in a film called My Life as a Dog. It was a huge Oscar-nominated film back. So the concept of fame, it wasn't alien to the household. He grew up seeing it. He knew what cameras and public attention looked like.
But he wasn't the kid trying to get in front of them.
Not at all. He wasn't the kid doing cartwheels to get attention. Quite the opposite.
The sources are all really, really specific about his temperament as a kid, and especially as a teenager. They describe him as incredibly introverted, sensitive, and battling what they call crippling social anxiety.
And on top of that, something that we can't just gloss over, he had severe acne.
Right. And it's not a small thing when you're 15, 16 years old.
No, we shouldn't minimize it. For a teenager, severe acne is like a psychological. It just destroys your self-image. It makes you want to hide your face. It can make something as simple as eye contact pain.
It makes you want to be invisible. So you have this context, right? While all the other kids in Stockholm are hitting that age, they're starting to sneak beers, go to house parties, trying to figure out how to talk to girls, navigating that whole social hierarchy. Tim is in his room.
He's a gamer.
A serious gamer. He was deep into World of Warcraft and Counter-Strike. That was his entire ecosystem. That was his social life.
And that context is so vital because it directly explains how he found music. It wasn't about performance. It was never, I want to be a rock star so people will look at me. It was about the computer.
He tried guitar.
Right, he did for a couple of years, but it didn't stick. The sources say his fingers hurt. He didn't like the physical mechanics of it. It wasn't intuitive to him. But then, when he was 16, a friend introduced him to a piece of software. It's called FL Studio.
FL Studio. I remember this. Back then it was called Fruity Loops, wasn't it?
Exactly, Fruity Loop. And for anyone listening who isn't a producer, FL Studio is a digital audio workstation, a DAW, but it's unique because it's so visual. It relies heavily on something called a piano roll.
It looks like a grid, right? Like a spreadsheet for music.
That's a great way to put it. It's a grid representing time and pitch. You don't need to know how to physically play the piano to use it. You can just click notes onto the grid with a mouse. You can literally draw the melody. You see the pattern.
So for a gamer kid like Tim, who was already used to logic puzzles and visual interfaces,
it was perfect.
Yeah.
It wasn't an instrument in the traditional sense. It was code. It was a system to be figured out. He read on a forum that the software allowed you to paint melody, and that was the hook. That phrase just clicked for him.
And he became obsessed. We're not talking about a casual hobby. We're talking about a kid who basically went from a gaming addiction to a music addiction overnight.
The sources are really clear on this. He was working on music for 9 hours a day, 5 days a week. He would come home from school and go straight to the computer.
His parents would wake up at 2 a.m. to get a glass of water, and they'd just see the light on under his bedroom door. And they'd hear this faint, thumping beat.
This is what I call the bedroom sync. It's such a crucial concept to understand, Tim. Creating music was his refuge from his anxiety. When you're alone in your room at 3 a.m., focusing on a melody, staring at that grid, you don't have acne.
Right.
You aren't awkward. You don't have to make small talk. You have total and complete control over the entire universe that you are building, note by note. It was his ultimate safe space. The music wasn't for an audience yet. It was for him.
And he was just prolific. He was churning out these tracks. He used the name Timberman at first, and I love this detail. He was so strategic even then. He wasn't just making noise in his room. He wanted feedback. He wanted to get it out there.
But he knew how the game worked.
He knew that record labels would just ignore some random kid from Sweden. So he would go into these music blogs and forums and he would leak his own tracks.
The leak strategy, it's brilliant, really.
He'd post a track and pretend to be someone else. He'd write, hey, have you guys heard this new track by Timberman? It's amazing. He was trying to hack the system from his bedroom. He was building his own hype cycle before he even had a career.
It shows he had this innate instinct for how the internet worked, how culture moved online. But before we get to his discovery, we have to talk about because eventually he needed a MySpace page, which really dates the story, doesn't it?
Yeah, a MySpace page.
And Timberman was either taken or it just didn't feel right anymore. So he's discussing names with a friend and he settles on the name Avicii.
Avici, one I at the end.
One I. And do you know the etymology of that? Because it's not just some cool-sounding word he made up.
It's Buddhist, I think. Something about hell.
It is the lowest level of hell.
Wow. Not just hell, the lowest level of hell. That is incredibly dark for a guy who would go on to make such joyful music.
It's the level where beings are reborn who have committed the most serious. It represents suffering without any interval, no breaks, just constant, unending suffering.
So why do we know him as Avicii with 2 eyes?
Simply because Avicii was already taken on MySpace, so he just added an extra eye to get the user purely practical.
But the symbolism there, you can't ignore the irony. The man who created some of the most uplifting, happy, put your hands in the air anthems of the entire decade. The guy whose music makes you feel like you can fly, named himself after a place of eternal suffering.
It's a grim foreshadowing. It's really the central irony of his entire life. He chose a name that represented hell for music that brought millions feeling of heaven, and very, very quick, his own life, strange, tragic.
Right, and that's when the catalyst enters the picture. Or, depending on how you read these sources, maybe the accelerant,
ashpurnery.
You can't tell the story of Avicii without Ash.
Absolutely not. He's a fascinating and to some a very polarizing character story. He was a club promoter, a law student, and a talent scout. And the sources all agree he had a scary good instinct for talent.
So he was one of the guys reading those blogs.
He was trawling those blogs, listening to thousands of terrible tracks, just sifting through all the noise. And he stumbled upon Tim's music.
And he didn't just hear a beat, he heard potential.
He saw a diamond in the rough. He heard a kid with raw melodic genius. I mean, Tim had this innate understanding of melody that you just cannot teach. It's something you're born with, but he had zero direct. Tim was just making cool loops in his room.
He needed structure.
He needed a plan. So Ash sends him a message, a cold message on Facebook, basically saying, I can help you. Let me handle the business side. You just focus on making the music.
And for Tim, this shy kid with no connections, that must have been like a lifeline.
He said yes immediately. And the source calls this decision one of the best he ever made, but also the one that ultimately defined his tragic trajectory.
It's that classic dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the talent versus the management.
It's the quintessential story. Tim was the shy, directionless. Ash was the ambitious, connected manager with a master. And Ash was very, very clear about his goals from the beginning. He didn't just want to book a few gigs for Tim. He famously told him, I'm going to make you the biggest artist in the world. And he meant it.
And he started shaping it. It wasn't just go make music. Ash was telling Tim what to wear. He told him he needed to lose weight. He professionalized him. He was grooming him for the spotlight that he wasn't naturally comfortable with.
He took Tim from a bedroom hobbyist to a serious contender in the music world. And it all happened so fast. Ash secured a record deal before Tim was even 20 years old.
And in 2009, he releases a track called Brom.
And if you go back and listen to that track now, you can hear it immediately. That signature Avicii sound, it's already there. The DNA is present.
So how would you define that sound? For someone listening who doesn't know music theory, what makes an Avicii song sound like an Avicii song?
It's what the industry eventually called big room melodic house. He uses these grand, sweeping piano melodies that feel almost like pop songs or even hymns. They're very emotional. And he layers those over a driving 4-on-the-floor, 128 beats per minute kick drum.
It's very structured.
Very. But the key, the real secret ingredient, is the optimism. It's not dark and gritty and industrial like the techno you'd hear in a Berlin basement. It's bright. One critic called it musical euphoria. It's engineered to target the pleasure centers of your brain.
But here's the friction point, right? The music was ready for the stadium, but the man making it was absolutely not.
Not even close. The sources mentioned that despite the hits starting to roll in, Tim had zero stage presence. When he started playing his first few shows, he would just stare at the equipment. He was 100% producer.
He was a studio rat. He wanted to be in the dark, making the sounds, not standing on a podium with fireworks going off behind him.
He didn't know how to interact with a crowd. He didn't know how to DJ in the performance sense of the word, throwing his hands up, clapping, jumping on the table, counting down the drop. He just wanted to mix the songs and make sure the technical trends.
But the machine was already starting to rev up. The demand was growing. And then came the song that changed absolutely everything. The song that, even if you lived under a rock in 2011, you heard it.
Levels. It's actually hard to overstate how massive this track was. It wasn't just another hit song. It was a genuine cultural shifting point. It was a phenomenon.
Let's unpack the making of it, because it wasn't a straight line. It's not like you just sat down and wrote in 5 minutes.
No, it evolved. It started as a demo in 2010, and Tim sends it to Mike Posner. Remember him? Cooler than me.
Of course.
Posner writes 6 different vocal ideas for it. 6. He's trying to turn it into a traditional pop song, and none of them fit. It just wasn't clicking. The magic.
And this is where Tim's genius ear for sampling comes into play. He goes digging. He finds an Etta James sample.
The song Something's Got a Hold On. Classic gospel soul vocal.
And he takes that one vocal line, oh, sometimes I get a good feeling, pitches it up, he speeds it up, he chops it, drops it over this incredibly infectious, progressive house synth line.
And the result is, well, one music critic in our notes describes it as insultingly simple.
It really is, though. It's a simple melody, a vocal loop, and a beat. That's it.
But that simplicity is the genius of it. It relied purely on melody and positive. And you have to remember the context of the music scene at that time. In 2010, 2011, the big trend in dance music was dubstep.
Skrillex.
Exactly. Skrillex. It was heavy, aggressive, grimy bass. It sounded like machinery grinding itself to pieces. It was almost angry music. Levels went in the complete opposite direction. Pure, unadulterated joy, accessible.
And the explosion was just instant. It leaked online, it got played on BBC Radio 1 in the UK, and suddenly every DJ in the world was playing it in their club sets before it was even officially released.
And then came the moment at Ultra Music Festival in Miami.
March 2011. This is the moment. Ultra is the Super Bowl of electronic music. It's the industry's biggest stage. Tim plays the finished version of Levels to 80,000 people. And if you watch the videos from that night, the crowd reaction isn't just excitement, it's hysteria.
It's the moment the entire world collectively agreed this is the song of the summer.
And that was the tipping point.
Yeah.
The song went to #1 in Sweden for 7 weeks straight. It was top 5 all over Europe. But the real, truly impossible feat was cracking the U.S. Billboard Hot 100.
And explain why that was so impossible at the time.
Because up until that point, The U.S. mainstream treated dance music, or techno as they often derisively called it, as a niche joke. It was for raves. It was for kids in neon pants chewing on pacifiers. It wasn't for the radio. The U.S. charts were completely dominated by hip-hop, R&B, and pop.
Katy Perry, Rihanna, Eminem.
Right. Dance music just couldn't break through the gatekeepers.
And Levels acted like a Trojan horse.
That's the perfect analogy. It was catchy enough to be considered pop, but it was undeniably dance music. It broke into the top 40. It peaked at number 60. But crucially, it stayed on the charts for 20 weeks. It forced the U.S. mainstream to finally pay attention to EDM. It bridged that gap.
And once that bridge was built, the floodgates just opened.
Levels didn't just make Avicii famous. It literally created the era of the superstar DJ.
It completely changed the cultural landscape. All of a sudden, DJs were the new rock stars. They weren't just the anonymous guys in the corner playing records anymore. They were the headline. This is the exact moment when Las Vegas started throwing millions and millions of dollars at DJs for residence.
The win excess Hakazan.
The fees went from, a few $1,000s a night to $200,000, then $400,000 a night. It was a gold rush.
And Tim is riding right at the top of this massive wave. He's got the private jets, the champagne, millions of fans screaming his name. He is the face of the entire move. But you remember the bedroom sanctuary. You remember the crippling anxiety.
This is where the story turns dark. Because the success that launched him into the stratosphere was also the thing that started to suffocate him. Tim was still that anxious kid who didn't want to be on stage.
And the schedule they built for him was, it was inhumane. We have the touring data right here. In the year 2012 alone, he played over 320 shows.
Let's just pause on that number for a second.
Yeah.
320 shows. There are only 365 days in a year.
That is basically a show every single night, with international travel in.
Just think about the logistics of that for a minute. Finish a show at 2 a.m. Your body is pumping with adrenaline. You get in a car, go to an airport, get on a plane. You fly to the next city, and that could be from Vegas to Ibiza or from Tokyo to Rome.
You're constantly crossing time.
You try to sleep on the plane. You land. You go to the hotel. You try to sleep some more. You wake up. You go to the venue. You do the sound check. You play the show. You get back in the car. And you do it again. And again and again.
It is physically impossible to do that and remain healthy, even for the most seasoned, extroverted performer. But when you add severe social anxiety to that mix, it is a guaranteed recipe for disaster.
So you have to ask, how do you cope? How do you get on stage in front of 50,000 people when your every natural instinct is telling you to hide in
liquid courage?
Alcohol.
The sources are very, very clear on. He started using alcohol to manage the nerves and the exhaustion. It became a tool. A functional tool for his job.
It wasn't just about partying. It was medication, a couple of drinks to loosen up before the set, a couple more to get through the set, and then a few more to come down from the adrenaline spike so he could actually get some sleep flight.
And the body. The body always keeps the score.
Yeah.
Very quickly, the health crises began. In early 2012, he gets diagnosed with acute pancreatitis.
Which, if you haven't experienced it or known someone who has, is apparently just excruciatingly painful. It's an inflammation of the pancreas, and it's almost always triggered by heavy drinking or golf. It feels like you are being stabbed in the stomach constantly.
It's agony. He was hospitalized in New York. The doctors put him on an IV drip. They told him in no uncertain term, you need to stop drinking, period.
But he didn't. Or maybe he felt like he couldn't. Because the tour had to continue. The contracts were already signed. The machine had to keep moving.
So then in 2013, he's hospitalized again, this time in Australia. And the doctors are even more direct. They're telling him, look, you need surgery. We need to remove your gallbladder. You need to rest.
And what happens?
He keeps working. He actually refused the surgery at that time because he had an album to finish and a massive world tour to promote. He was, or he felt he was, pushed back onto the road.
This part of the story, looking back, it just makes me so angry. He is literally in a hospital bed, and the machine, the management, the promoters, and maybe even his own internal pressure to not let people down, it just keeps him moving.
There's that scene in the documentary of True Stories. Have you seen it?
Yes. It is incredibly hard to watch. It feels almost invasive because he looks so fragile, so broken.
There is a scene where he is half asleep in a hospital bed. He's clearly medicated. His eyes are barely open. And you have people around him asking about radio interviews and future show dates. They're showing him schedules.
He's not a patient. He's a commodity. He's a product on a shelf. He isn't a person who is sick. He's an asset that needs to be deployed to the next market.
It's a heartbreaking cycle because in 2014, his body finally gives up. His gallbladder and appendix burst. He has to have emergency surgery. He can't avoid it anymore, but he still has shows to play. So what do they give him for the pain?
Opiate.
Strong one. Percocet, OxyContin, highly, highly addictive stuff.
So now, just look at the chemical cocktail he's dealing with. You have a young man with pre-existing anxiety who is self-medicating with alcohol. He is now in chronic physical, and he's treating that with powerful, all while traveling across multiple time zones every day and sleeping on planes.
The pills, hid the physical pain. They hid the anxiety. They allowed the machine to keep running. But they were absolutely destroying him from the inside out.
And there's a quote from Tim himself in the source material from around this period. He said, "I told them it will kill me, but they were
relentless. He felt like he couldn't say no. He felt responsible for the livelihood of dozens, maybe hundreds of people around him. His manager, his tour crew, the promoters, the venue staff. If Avicii doesn't play, nobody gets paid.
That is a massive, massive burden for a 24-year-old to carry.
And yet somehow, amidst all this chaos, creatively, he was still taking these huge risks. And this is what makes him such a fascinating and brilliant artist. In the middle of this complete physical and mental deterioration, he decides to make his debut album, True.
And the expectation from the label, fans, from everyone, was that he would just make Levels 2.0. Just 12 tracks of big room house.
And instead, he brings out a banjo.
Literally. He goes to Ultra Music Festival in 2013 to debut the new tracks, the main stage. This is the most judgmental, purist crowd in all of. These are people who want bass rock.
And he brings out a live band, bluegrass musician. He brings out Aloe Black, and he plays Wake Me Up.
With its acoustic guitars, the soulful vocals, that country hoedown beat, the crowd at Ultra was just, there were reports that people were actually booing. They didn't know how to dance to it. They were waiting for the electronic drop.
The Twitter reaction was vicious. I mean, people were saying he had completely ruined his career.
But his instincts were perfect. He was hearing something that nobody else could hear yet. Wake Me Up went on to become an even bigger global hit than Love. It went to #1 in 20 countries.
It proved he wasn't just a beat maker, he was a true songwriter. He essentially created a new genre overnight.
Yeah.
Folk EDM.
And that whole album, True, it's a masterpiece of genre blending. You've got Hey Brother, which leans even harder into that bluegrass sound.
There's a great anecdote about Hey Brother. The vocalist on that track is Dan Tyminski. He's the guy from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The guy who sings Man of Constant Sorrow.
A bluegrass legend.
Right. So Tim asks him to do the track, and Tyminski has no idea who Avicii is. He's a bluegrass guy. So he texts his daughter.
Universal tech support line.
Exactly. And his daughter replies, "He's a genius, one of my favorites. Why are you asking?" And when he tells her that Avicii wants to work with him, she just replies with one word, bullshit.
That just shows you the generational gap, but also the level of respect he commanded from other musicians. He worked with Nile Rodgers, the legend from Chic and Daft Punk. He worked with Adam Lambert, members of Incubus. He was pulling from everywhere.
And if you really listen to the lyrics on True, they feel so personal. There are songs about identity, about struggle, about trying to find your way in the world. Wake me up when it's all over. I tried carrying the weight of the world. It's almost a cry for help, disguised as a massive pop song.
But as the touring and the pain continued, the unraveling just accelerated. The next era, the Stories album era, felt different.
Stories came out in 2015. And if True was focused and revolutionary, Stories was, well, it was chaotic. The sources describe it as lacking focus.
It was all over the place. There was pop, there was house, there was reggae, there was even rap on it.
And I think that's a direct reflection of his mental state at the time. There were too many directions, too much pressure. It felt frantic. He was trying to do everything at once while he was personally falling apart.
Now, there are some great songs on it. Sunset Jesus is mentioned as having this real pain behind the glossy production, with lyrics about being in California and feeling total. But as a whole, the album mirrored his life. He was fragmented.
And finally, in 2016, he hit the wall. He couldn't do it anymore.
They decision to retire. This was a massive international news story. Avicii, at the absolute peak of his career, announces he is done with touring forever.
He wrote this long, open letter to his fans, citing his mental and physical health. He said he needed to find Tim again and stop being Avicii.
And this was not a smooth transition. This caused a huge rift with his manager, Ash Pornery. They split up right around this time.
Well, you have to think about the economics of it. Touring is the cash cow. You make pennies from streaming. You make millions from festivals and residency. By stopping the tour, Tim basically turned off the faucet of money for everyone in his orbit.
That creates incredible friction. Ash and Tim had been this inseparable unit for years, but now their fundamental goals were opposed. Ash wanted the brand to keep growing. Tim just wanted to survive. But he stood his ground.
And for a good while, it really seemed like it worked.
It did. He went to Tuscany. He went to the Maldives. He went back home to Stockholm. He completely stopped drinking. He started going to therapy. He was reading philosophy, a lot of Carl Jung, trying to understand the ego and the self.
He was reconnecting with his friends and family. He got a dog. He looked healthy in photos.
And most importantly, he went back to the studio. But this time, it was on his own terms.
He went back to the bedroom sanctuary.
He was reclaiming, exactly.
And he released an EP in August of 2017. And the source material says it sounded like Avicii without the chain. It was just pure melody. It was happy. It genuinely seemed like he had found the balance he was looking for. He was creating for the fun of it.
And that's what makes this timeline so incredibly tragic. The narrative isn't just a straight downward spiral. There was an upswing. There was real hope. He was getting better. He was planning for the future. He was building a new studio in his house. He was talking about working with new artists.
Which brings us to April 20th, 2018.
Muscat.
He was there on vacation at a luxury resort. And by all initial accounts, he was in good spirits. He was taking photos with fans in the lobby. He looked healthy. He was smiling.
But then the darkness came back, and it came back fast. Mental health is never a linear progression. You can have good days and sometimes the bad days just hit you like a tsunami when you least expect it.
The news broke on April 20th. Avicii dead at 20. I remember exactly where I was when I saw that headline. It didn't seem real. It felt like a hoax. You just assume someone that young, that famous, that talented, you assume they're invincible.
And the details that came out in the days and weeks after painted such a desperate picture. We learned there was a distress call made to his family just hours before it happened. A relative actually got on a plane and flew to Oman to try and save him. They knew something was terribly wrong.
He arrived 2 hours too late.
And the cause of death was later confirmed as suicide.
His family released a statement shortly after, and the language they used was just so raw and so honest. They didn't hide behind euphemisms. They didn't say it was a sudden illness. They called him a seeker, a fragile artistic soul.
And they said he could not go on any longer. He wanted to find...
That phrase it stays with me. He wanted to find peace.
It completely reframes the act of suicide, doesn't it? It wasn't a selfish act or a sudden snap of anger. It was the final, desperate move of someone who had been carrying this crushing weight, the anxiety, the pain, the pressure, the exhaustion for years. It was a culmination of that struggle. He tired.
Now, whenever a celebrity dies so tragically, the internet does what the internet does. Theories immediately started popping up.
Right. And we have to address this because it's a big part of the online conversation. There is persistent conspiracy theory that tries to link his death to a trafficking ring, connecting him to the deaths of Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell, claiming he was about to expose something in a new music video.
But we need to be very, very clear here, based on all of our sources.
The family has never, ever supported these claims. The police investigation in Oman found absolutely no foul play. And the sources emphasize that these theories, while they might be seductive to some because they provide a clear, cartoonish villain, they actually distract from the real, much scarier issue.
You don't need a secret cabal of villains in cloaks.
Exactly. The villain was right there in front of us the whole time.
The industry.
The industry. The relentless schedule. The commodification of a human being. The normalization of drug and alcohol abuse just to keep the talent performing. The profound isolation of the hotel room. That is what killed him. We don't need a conspiracy theory to explain why a fragile, anxious young man broke under that kind of unimaginable pressure. The truth is much sadder and, frankly, much simpler than the fiction.
The aftermath of his death felt like a global wake-up call for the music industry. The tributes just poured in from Madonna, U2, Coldplay. At the Billboard Awards, the Chainsmokers dedicated their win to him. They basically admitted on stage that their entire career wouldn't exist without him.
His musical legacy is absolute pure. He defined the sound of the 20s. He pioneered that folk EDM blend that gave us artists like Kygo. Levels is timeless. It will be played at weddings and festivals for the next year. But his real legacy, the one that might actually save lives, is the conversation he forced us to have about mental health.
His death forced the industry to stop. You can't just run people into the ground until they break in. You saw managers start taking mental health breaks for their artists seriously. Other artists started canceling tours when they felt burnout, and they would cite Avicii as the reason why.
And his family, they established the Tim Bergling Foundation in 2019. It focuses specifically on mental health awareness and suicide. They managed to turn their unimaginable grief into direct action. They want to ensure that Tim is remembered, not just a...
And they released the music he had been working, the posthumous album, Tim.
A posthumous album is always such, can feel so exploitative, like a label just trying to cash in on a track. But this one felt different. It felt like a gift. It felt like a goodbye letter. It was into Tim speaking to us one last time.
And all the proceeds went to the foundation.
Right. It was handled with such care. It's a beautiful but very sad ending.
You know, when we look back at the duality we started with, the massive stadium versus the quiet bedroom, it's just so tragic that the world wanted the guy in the stadium, the guy with the hand in the air.
But the guy in the bedroom, he just wanted to make music. He just wanted to solve the logic puzzle on the grid and hear a beautiful melody come out.
The very thing that saved him from his anxiety music was co-opted and used by the industry to destroy him.
That is the absolute crux of it. The refuge became the prison. The thing that cured his anxiety eventually became the source of his greatest unbearable pain.
It really makes you think about the hidden cost of the entertainment we consume. We see the incredible show, we hear the hit song on the radio, but we don't see the panic attack in the dressing room beforehand.
We don't see the painkillers on the tour, writer. We don't see the crushing loneliness of 1,000 empty hotel rooms.
And the source material explicitly mentions that Tim felt let down by friends and by management who just kept pushing him when he was clearly broken. He told them he was in pain, and they just checked the tour schedule and said, just a few more shows, you can do it.
Which leads to a really uncomfortable question.
So here's a question for you listening right now. In this era of constant content, where we demand more songs, more tours, more social media posts, more and more access to our idols, how much responsibility do we, the audience, bear for this?
Are we enjoying the art while completely ignoring the screams of the artist who's making it? It's an uncomfortable question, I know, but after hearing Tim's story, I think it's one we absolutely have to ask ourselves. The price of our entertainment should never be a human life.
Absolutely. It's something to think about the next time you hear Wake Me Up on the radio. Maybe this time, listen to it with new ears. Hear the words, not just the beat.
Hear the man, not just the brand.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. I know this was a heavy one, but it felt like an important one to tell. Take care of yourselves and maybe check on your quiet friends.
Indeed. Be safe out there.
See you next time.